Okay, so now I want to take this sort of general argument and clarify it, put it into logical context, show how the argument is supposed to work, discuss how we criticize it, and set it into the general context of philosophy. Why is this a philosophical argument? Why is this philosophy? What makes this an instance of philosophy? So, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is what makes this philosophy. Why is this an example of philosophy? Why would we talk about this in the philosophy class rather than some other kind of class? And the first answer, the fundamental answer, and this is the most important, the first thing is it uses logic to support a claim. Now when I say it uses logic, I mean it uses an argument. It makes an argument. I'm not saying it's good logic. I'm saying it's logic in the sense of someone making an argument. Does that make sense? Right? It gives reasons to support a claim. Now, there's two more reasons, but I'm going to lump them together in one reason, because both of them are adequate to make it philosophy. It addresses at least one philosophical topic. Now, what makes something a philosophical topic is that it's a question that has to be settled by logic, but cannot be settled by observation. That's a fundamental difference between philosophy and science, is when scientists decide they're going to settle an issue, a question that's important, and when people decide they're going to settle a scientific question scientifically, they say, hey, let's go out and make an observation. Or let's set up an experiment, some machinery or a situation, and observe the result. Science is fundamentally based on observation. When people talk about experiments, an experiment is when you set up certain conditions to see what will happen, to be able to make an observation. So that's something that's very fundamental about science, and it's something that philosophy can't do. If we could settle it, if a question could be settled by observation, it's not a philosophical question. And the reason it's not philosophical is because experimenting is difficult. Being able to do experiments is a hard thing. Being able to interpret the results of experiments is a hard thing, and it requires expertise, talent, or training, or a combination thereof. So you go to school to learn science, and if you go to school to learn to be a scientist, you learn rather different things than you learn to be a philosopher. You do learn logic. You learn way more math than a philosopher would do. But you learn how to design machines and how to draw inferences from theories. A philosophical topic is a topic of importance. It's an important, non-observational topic. It's something that people care about or have cared about, or at least a number of people have cared about. Not everybody cares about philosophy, like not everybody cares about science. And it's meaningful in some way. And it's a question that has to be settled by logic. And this argument actually addresses a number of philosophical topics. The first one, Meno's question, how is it that we have knowledge? Now there's an observation in there. And this actually makes an interesting, that, you know, I'm saying there's a fundamental difference between science and philosophy, and there certainly is. But there's also sometimes overlap. And when we get later in the semester, we'll start talking about the kind of philosopher called an empiricist, who's much more like a scientist than say, Plato or René Descartes. And we'll talk about, philosophers don't ignore observations. It's just that they can't settle their questions by observation, or they tend not to. Actually, to be perfectly honest, you go back far enough, they don't use the word science. Right? The people we consider the first scientists, the greatest scientists back in history, they would have considered themselves philosophers. A lot of the time they'd say they were natural philosophers. That's the old term for what we now call a scientist, is a natural philosopher. And then the others are called the moral philosophers or conceptual philosophers or I don't know, unnatural philosopher. I never heard that. They don't say that. So here's a question. There's an observation we can make. We have knowledge. Everyone here knows stuff. We know certain things. A number of questions we could ask about is, what is knowledge? How is knowledge different from belief? Right? And those are dealt with in other Socratic dialogues and other philosophy. This dialogue, the one that Meno deals with, is where does knowledge come from? And it provides an answer to that. This is an epistemological question. The word epistemology means study of knowledge. So whenever anyone talks about epistemology or says epistemological, they're talking simply about knowing stuff. What does it mean to be knowing stuff? But this is an existence question. It's a question about the way things are in the real world. It's not really an abstract, hypothetical thing about an imaginary world. It's about what is it that for someone to know something, and how is knowledge, and the question is, how is knowledge acquired? How is it that people know stuff? So Socrates gives an answer to that, and this addresses that question. So that's one reason it's philosophical. what is a human person? This is at least touched on by this dialogue, because there's the idea that the human mind, or as they use the term in the book, translate the psyche, or what we now call the soul. It's the idea that the soul can exist apart from a physical body. You have the slave boy, and Socrates is saying, oh yeah, well he lived before. That doesn't mean his body lived before. This body is new, relatively new. So reincarnation, an afterlife, a pre-life, a netherworld, the soul existing in other bodies and entirely apart from other bodies, from bodies at all. Right, that's a question about what does it mean to be human? How do humans exist? But there's another question that this is related to. There's the question of what kinds of things exist. What exists? This is a question, these are both actually questions, ontological questions. Ontology is the study of being. Right? There's this verb. When you sort of is that a noun or a verb? Being. But in science fiction they talk about it's a being from another world. Right?
That would make it a noun.
Yes, it would, but it's wrong. Science fiction is wrong. A being is like dancing or cooking. Being means existing, right? You know, you ever heard this phrase, to be or not to be? Right, that is the question. Whether it is noble in mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Sounds very painful. Or two by opposing, end them! And then there's a bit with the skull, and people stab each other, and everybody dies. And it's like, sorry, just a few weeks ago I watched Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. It's great, it's the weirdest damn thing. Right, so these are ontological questions. It's the study of being. And what's always fascinating about this, being is the same thing as existence. Right? But it's a verb. So, right? So this pen is a being. It is being. It is being here. Right? It's doing existence. I have no idea where to go with that. It doesn't seem to mean anything that it's a verb, but it's just kind of cool. If you can figure out something that's important about the difference between being and existence, let me know. But, so these are ontological questions. What exists? How does a human person exist? What is a human being? Or a human, I don't know, would it be a humaning? Right, it's like, you know, you're all in here humaning. Again, I have nowhere to go with that. Right. And then there's what exists. And what exists is like, suppose I say there's an elephant in the room. Not just an elephant, a rampaging African elephant that is just charging around back and forth. And you say, well, I can't see it. And I say, well, it's invisible. And I say, and you say, well, I can't feel it. Well, it's intangible. And I can't hear it. It's inaudible. I can't smell it. It's insmellable. It's unsmellable. Is there a word for that? It's odorless, utterly odorless, right? Right? And you say, well, how would we detect its existence? What are we going to say? You can't. It exists, but you can't see it, smell it, touch it, taste it, feel it, or do anything with it. Right? But it's here. Right? Now, how many of you want to hear that when you say that and just want to back slowly away? Okay, elephant, you know, just stay here and have a good time with your elephant. That sounds mad, doesn't it? Right, 2,000 years ago, didn't sound mad at all. You can't see it, smell it, da-da-da-da-da, but it exists. Well, you know, there's the idea of the soul. You can't see it, you can't detect it, there's no, you know, it doesn't have weight, there's no, but it exists. And up until about 500 years ago, no wait, John Locke, 300 years ago, less than 300 years ago, people, philosophers, believed in things that could not be detected by any means whatsoever. And we're going to deal with that again and again in the early part of the semester, and even kind of deal with it a bit in the late part of the semester, because that's actually an idea that keeps coming back. It shouldn't. It was kicked in the head by John Locke over 200 years ago, but it keeps rearing. It's a zombie idea. I mean, every so often, you know, you blow the head off and shotgun, and then it puts the head back on and keeps going. It's like it should be dead, but it's not. It just keeps coming back in different forms. So there's two kinds of questions you have in philosophy. Ontological questions about what things exist, and then epistemological questions about what is knowledge, or what all the questions you could possibly, how is knowledge different from belief or opinion and so on, and where does knowledge come from. So that's what makes this a philosophical issue. Okay, any questions so far? I'm hoping that this has sort of explained philosophy a little bit more to you guys, so you have more idea. There are other areas of philosophy. Anywhere that there's something that's important to think about, important and interesting to think about, and you can't make observations to settle it, there'll be philosophers trying to think about it using logic. There is, for instance, a philosophy of biology. How do we interpret the theory of evolution from natural selection and the arguments surrounding it? There's a philosophy of physics. How do we interpret the theory of quantum mechanics and the arguments surrounding that? Someone once told me there's a philosophy of geography, but I don't really believe that. I just can't see.
Geography can be touched and seen.
Yeah, it's like, why would you have a philosophy of geography? I don't believe in it. I mean, actually there is, but I can't imagine that I would ever be interested in it. It's just the same thing. No, it isn't. Okay, so that's why this is philosophy. So now, the argument, actually this argument has a technical name, which will not be on the test, but I want to put it up just because I think it's cool. called a disjunctive syllogism. It's a cool name. You don't have to remember it. Oh, by the way, talking about, I said that in philosophy you don't do observations. What did we just spend like half an hour discussing that says I'm wrong about that? Philosophy, you do stuff that can't be settled by observations. And what was going on before that says I'm a liar? This is one of those things where you're like, maybe someone in the class is going, hey, you know what? He says that philosophers don't do that, but then he just talked about somebody doing it.
Socrates was doing it.
Right.
Mhm.
Socrates was doing an experiment. The slave boy thing is an experiment. So it's... So this thing of where does knowledge come from, that's on the borderline. It's kind of a scientific question because we can make observations. We can make observations of people gaining knowledge. And Socrates thought you could make an observation of somebody recollecting knowledge that he didn't recollect before. So observation can be involved in philosophy, and we will see a lot of that. When something becomes easily settlable by observation, then it usually stops being a philosophical question, or a big part of it breaks off from philosophy. For instance, psychology. Psychology used to be a philosophical issue, the idea of philosophy of mind. The only people who talked about the nature of mind were philosophers for a couple thousand years. And then people started making observations, started coming up with physical theories. We had Sigmund Freud. We had Henry James. It was William James, sorry. It was one of the James boys. Different James boys. Not Jesse and Frank, William and Henry. Did that just go over everybody's head? How many people here have heard of Jesse James? Right. How many people know he had a brother called Frank? Right. They heard them called the James boys? Right. Okay, somebody was here could have got the joke. Right. So there were two more James boys, William and Henry. One was a novelist, the other was a philosopher. Neither was any good. They were both crap. They're very famous, though. So. I thought that. So there's this observation thing. So, right, sometimes philosophy and science are kind of wedged in together. They're stuck together, and sometimes they can separate. But usually, a bit of the science stays behind in philosophy because we have philosophy of mind that pays attention to neuroscience and stuff. And later in the semester, I'm going to be talking about philosophy of mind. So we have this disjunctive syllogism and observation. Right? And so we have actually two linked arguments. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and lay this out. Okay, so everybody's got this down and knows why this is a philosophical issue. All right. So. All right. So. All right, so I'm going to break this down into two arguments. I'm going to try and put it up crudely. Oh, I shouldn't say we want that. I see. Oh, I know what I did wrong. Sorry. So, first premise, they, meaning Meno and Socrates and anybody else who was hanging around, observed Socrates just asking questions and not telling the boy anything. And then Meno said that the kid was born in the house, meaning he was part of that household. He was a Greek slave who was born and bred in Meno's establishment. Meno was a rich guy, by the way. Socrates hung around with rich people. He wasn't rich himself, but he had rich friends, so he kept him entertained with his annoying stories. So Meno observed the boy from birth and never being taught math. So the boy is one of Meno's attendants, means a servant, somebody who's supposed to fetch and carry and do landscaping or he's a house slave, does the cooking, cleaning, stuff like that. Right. And Meno said that we observed the boy from birth and he'd never been taught math in this life. No one taught the boy math.
Is that like the same as gut instinct?
No.
No.
No, I don't use gut instinct as a metaphor. Mainly gut instinct, because this is about knowledge. This is about stuff that's true. The gut, people who say, I've got a gut instinct, in practice, it's been tested, the gut is usually wrong. In professions where people go by their gut, they tend to make more mistakes. Right? In medicine, for instance, if you follow the DSM-3, you do okay. If you go with your gut, you tend to kill people. So what kind of this is the observational argument, also might be called an empirical argument. You've got a piece of observations and it's supposed to add up to something. Second argument is what you call a deductive argument, and that won't be on the test, but it's a different kind of logic. Disjunctive. Disjunctive syllogism, and the important thing is it's non-observational. Now, one thing I want to point out is this distinction I'm making here, and I'm talking about observational arguments and non-observational arguments, arguments that are based by relationships between concepts or relationships between statements. They didn't make that distinction then. They really, back in Socrates' time, Plato's time, Aristotle's time, right up to René Descartes, they did not distinguish between conceptual and observational arguments. They would use both kinds of arguments, but they wouldn't really notice that they were different kinds of arguments. It was only with John Locke and then later David Hume that people started to make this, that they identified this distinction and studied this distinction between an argument based on observation or a fact based on observation, or one based on non-observation, which is this kind of argument here. All right, so I'm going to use letter symbols here, and I hope that you'll be able to follow on. When I write P, when I say math, I kind of mean the square doubling problem, but I'm just going to call it math. So math is sort of standing up right here. So when I say P, the slave either learned math in life. Q, the slave had the info in his soul all along. And to use the it was innate. And I want you to remember the word innate, because the doctrine of innate ideas is something that pops up in philosophy rather frequently. We're going to have it come up again when we talk about René Descartes in a couple of weeks. An innate idea is an idea you knew without ever being told, that was in your soul. It's something you knew from before you were born, from before you were conceived, from the time your soul was, well, has existed forever. Right. So the slave had and so that's the doctrine of innate ideas. And again, it's an answer to the question, where does knowledge come from? So here's the argument. First is either P or Q is true, or both. That at least one of P or Q is true. That's Socrates says this, right, in the dialogue. Says that either the slave learned the math while he was alive, or learned how to solve the square doubling problem while he was alive, or he had the information in his soul all along. Now, right. Well, if no one taught the slave math, he didn't learn it in life, right? Right? So from this, I'm going to draw pink. from this, it follows that P, this is premise 2, P is not true. Right, well if either P or Q is true, and we know that P is not true,
And Q must be the answer.
Right.
Q is true.
Q is true.
And that's how you make the, oh, that makes sense.
Right. That's a disjunctive syllogism. If you ever take symbolic logic, it's called a disjunctive syllogism. It's pretty cool. It's one of my favorites. But then I'm weird.
No, I feel
Right.
like
So that's the argument. Now, if Q is true, what are the consequences? Well, if P and Q is true, this explains where ideas come from. Ideas are innate.
that can't be,
Right.
not all.
And souls live before now if you read right, souls live before now okay, and Socrates says the soul is immortal. Now, in the early part of his dialogue, he talks about talking to priests. It has been hypothesized that these are Egyptian priests. Greece and Egypt were in contact, they traded. Greeks traveled to Egypt, Egyptians traveled to Greece on business or just if they were rich for pleasure. And it's hypothesized that Socrates got this idea from the Egyptians. It's also possible that Socrates got this idea from the Indians. Greece and India were probably in contact, and Indians probably traveled to Greece. There was trade. Certainly ideas could have gone back and forth. But that part of it doesn't really matter from the philosophical part of the study. That's a sort of cultural, historical kind of thing. You might wonder how Greece was influenced by India, how Greece was influenced by Egypt. If you're an art historian, you can study this. If you're a cultural historian or an archaeologist, you can study this. But it's not what you study in a philosophy class. What you study in a philosophy class is arguments. It's this stuff that I put on the board and conclusions. And the claim is, one of the Socrates' claim is, right, if the slave had the influence of his soul all along, the soul is immortal. Right. So what I'd like you to do is to take a little bit of a think about this and see if you can tell me where the problems are. And I'm going to get like a red marker. It's not purple marker, right? Sorry. What are the problems? Is this a good argument?
I don't know if it's a problem, but I have a question.
Yeah.
So if souls are immortal and the information is innate, does that make people who've lived before smarter than someone who hasn't been on the earth before?
Oh, well, that's a good question. Yeah, if the information is there, where did it come from? Where did it come from originally?
If you've traveled a lot, then you make you smarter.
Right. Do you guys know the turtles joke? It's an old philosophical joke. So there's this traveler goes to India and asks about their their mythology, right? They say, what is your theory of the universe? And they say, well, the Earth. Oh, by the way, let me, while I'm thinking of it, if you can get, I think this is on Hulu. if you can read it's a book, and they also did a TV adaptation called The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. You can watch it on Hulu, and it will be cool. I won't say any more about it, but okay. So he goes to this guru, this wise man, and he says, "Okay, so what does the world rest on? Does the world hang?" The guy says, "Oh no, the world rests on the backs of 4 elephants." Okay, what do the elephants stand on? Well, they stand on the back of a great turtle. Okay, so what does the turtle stand on? He says, well, that stands on another turtle. And what does that turtle stand on? Well, that's another turtle. And they said, oh, well, it's turtles all the way down. Right. Now, what's logically wrong with that answer? All the way down to what? Right? What is the turtle standing on turtles, standing on turtles, standing on turtles? Okay, you guys, it's all handling void. If there's no ground, what holds the ground? Guys, by the way, what holds the ground up? Literally, for our world, where you live, where we live, what holds the ground up?
Gravity.
Holds the ground up?
Oh.
Gravity holds us down. The ground holds us up. What holds the ground up?
The core?
Nothing holds the ground up. Okay? The ground pulls us towards it, right? If we were out beyond the Oort cloud, right? If we were out beyond the solar system, would we fall?
No.
No, because out beyond the solar system, the influence of gravity is so slight that it would take us thousands of years to be pulled back towards the Earth. Because we get really fast towards the end, but at the beginning it's infinitesimal. Okay, so right, there's nothing that holds the ground up. The Earth is flying through space at many thousands of miles a second. I mean, we've traveled thousands of miles since this class began. And when we come around again, we won't be in the same place we were last year because the sun is moving thousands of miles. Everything is hurtling through space. Nothing holds the ground up. Nothing holds the sun up. Everything is falling in different directions. And every so often things bump into each other. Isn't that cheerful? Right. So... I have no idea where I was going with it. I was going somewhere, right? What was I talking about?
Yeah, what about the turtles?
Oh, the turtles. Right. It's all turtles all the way down. It can't be turtles all the way down because the answer is down to what? Right? That, if everything stands on something else, that's an infinite regress. It doesn't work. So the idea of knowledge, where did knowledge come from? Now, this is why, and I really did not understand this argument until this semester, when I started reading the actual translation of Meno. Previously, I'd been content to use the text, and to trust what Donald Palmer told me. But I go and look, and I read it, and what does Socrates say at the beginning of the excerpt that I gave you?
For Meno?
In the Meno. He says that this guy has lived before and he's picked up information in other lives. Right? He's picked up information in other lives. So he learned it, he could have learned it in a previous life. Right? That's part of his... That is Socrates' idea, is that people can learn things in other lives. Well, that at least partially contradicts what he says about information being innate. At best, some information is innate and some is learned. Does that make sense? If you look at that part of the dialogue again, and it's in the early part of the reading I gave you, He says people have lived at other times and they learned things from them. And he says this about the slave too. So has Socrates proved that all ideas are innate?
No.
Right. If he's proved anything, he's proved one idea is innate.
For an idea.
Right. So he's proved that ideas can be innate. But he hasn't proved that about other stuff. Right. Just this one idea. And that's also a weakness. I mean, that's a weakness in this method of reasoning, is that, hey, I can show you one thing that's innate. Okay, that's one. What about all the rest? Oh, all the rest is the same. Because... So there's a question of where knowledge came from in the beginning. How did it get started? If all knowledge is innate, that question is not answered. Right? You sort of say, well, magic, or it's put in there by the gods, or stuff like that. And that all brings up other problems. If he's proved that the slave if he has proved that the slave had to have lived before this life, has he proved that the soul is actually immortal? Now, what's the most he's proved?
He's lived once before.
Yeah, he's lived once before. Great, that's right. Yeah, right. Once before, the slave. He hasn't proved that the slave lived forever. He hasn't proved that the slave lived more than one. Maybe he was a mathematician in a former life. If you look at the Indian model of reincarnation, people have different kinds of lives at different times. And, right? So he could have been a mathematician. He could have been educated in a former life. All that has to happen is, all that has to happen for this to work is that some people have more than one life. Maybe it's just this slave boy. Maybe it's a lot of people, but you have 2 or 3 lives. He's got one observation, and he's trying to put this whole construction on it. Yeah.
Concept into it.
Right. Which leads me to, and this, by the way, this kind of thing is typical of a style of philosophy called rationalism. I'm going to write that here. Now, Socrates and Plato would never have heard the word rationalism. They would not know what it meant. They thought they were just doing philosophy. Rationalists, people we call rationalist philosophers, did not call themselves this. This is a word we came up with once we'd invented a different kind of philosophy called empiricism. And so once people became empiricists, they needed a name for what they were not doing, for what people were doing before. So they call philosophers like Socrates and Plato and René Descartes, they call them rationalists because they do a lot of reasoning but not a lot of observation, or not a lot of facts. That's one of the things that characterizes rationalism is that there is very little or no factual data used. Little or no observation, little or no attention to evidence. But a lot of theorizing, a lot of speculating, a lot of arguments that go step by 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 step. And so that's one of the things I want you to, the kind of philosophy we're talking about this week and next week and for the next couple of weeks is called rationalism.
What's the word that you just underlined? What does that mean?
Long.
Oh, long.
The 2 O's go long.
Oh, yes.
Long.
Super long.
She's really the 2 O's.
Big theories. And they said make these sweeping, radical claims. The soul is immortal. Knowledge is innate. Why? Because I didn't tell the stove boy knew something without me explicitly telling him. This one guy did this one thing one time.
I'm gonna just take the logical answer to that.
Right.
That's what you did.
So, all right, so we got these two arguments. Which is the one that's actually logically weak? The observation one or the non-ob one?
Which is weaker?
The what?
The non-observational.
This is a weak argument?
Just-
Why is it weak?
Just because there's no like real foundation to what they.
But that's
It's
this
just like-
argument. Right. This premise is based on this argument. So if this premise is false, it has to be because this is a bad argument. Right. This is actually a logically valid argument. If this is true and this is true, this cannot be false.
That's just the mathematics, that's like. just
Right,
doing
it's
the
like
math.
mathematics.
Doing the math of
Mathematics
it.
is actually based on this kind of logic. Right. This, if this is not true, the only way this can be not true, the only way this premise can fail is if this argument fails. So out of these two, if this is wrong, right? If these two are both true, can this be false?
No,
No, if these two,
That would be true.
yeah, if these
Both
two
of
are
these
true, that would
has
be true.
to be true.
right.
Right. Is it implausible to think that Meno, that no one had ever taught the guy logic? He's a slave in a Greek house. They don't spend money on slaves. They don't educate slaves. And we can trust Meno, right? He said, you know, I've seen this guy.
So it is a logical
Right.
answer.
But we observed Socrates just asking questions. All right, you guys read the dialogue. Was Socrates just
No.
asking questions?
No, he experimented.
Right. Experimented. Right. Well, Socrates says stuff like, is it this or is it this?
Yeah, or take this.
Now suppose we do this. Who thought of the idea of cutting the
Splitting it
square,
and
putting in
everything.
the diagonal? Who
Socrates.
mentions that? What? Second?
Oh no.
Socrates. Right, that was Socrates. I read that. It's like Socrates, and the guy, he says, did you observe him thinking this stuff up without me telling him? And I'm like, and Meno says, oh no, yes, he didn't, you didn't tell him anything. And I'm like, you came up with the idea of the diagonal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many of you had that reaction that it's like, yeah, Socrates is telling him everything. So he's basically giving the guy hints as he goes along. Right. Furthermore, what other possibility is not ruled out? Let's say I gave you, let's say that without having you read the dialogue, before I gave you this dialogue to read, I had asked you to figure out a way of doubling the square. Right, giving you that problem. Is it impossible? Right, is it reasonable to think that nobody in this room would have been able to figure it out? Right, you're all smart people. Some of you, given time, you'd all probably figure it out. And some of you would figure it out very quickly. It's a hard problem, and I couldn't figure it out. Well, it's a fairly hard problem, but it's not impossible. There are ways to do it, and if you play around with it and draw and doodle. So Socrates drops big hints, and the slave boy could have figured something out himself. That's the thing that's not ruled out. Did anybody in the dialogue say, and this slave boy is not capable of working out mathematics for himself because? No, that was assumed, and there was no reason to assume it. So there's another rule of philosophy, or other thing, is watch out. watch out for unsupported and unsaid assumptions. Sometimes people assume things and they don't even say they're assuming it. And you have to, and in fact, quite often, the weakest part of the argument is the thing that is not said out loud. Because when you say it out loud, it suddenly sounds stupid.
No,
Right. So, for me, the most reasonable interpretation of the interaction between Socrates and the slave boy is that Socrates was actually teaching that kid mathematics. He was teaching him how to solve, he was leading him through the solution. And at some points, he really leads him, and he says, well, what about if we draw these diagonals? These are lines that are called diagonals. What do you think about that? How many squares in this? How many squares in that? Well, there's 2, there's 4. Is that twice? Yes. Well, yes it is. What does the slave boy say? Does he ever say, should we try this?
he just follows along, yes.
Yeah, he basically says, yes, Socrates, no, Socrates, yes, Socrates. Look, see how he remembered stuff? All right, so at this point, I hope that I want you guys to be capable of looking at a piece of respected philosophy, a piece of something that's given to you seriously, and say, here is important ancient philosophy, something people have studied for thousands of years. Look at it and go, no! Right. To be able to look at it and say, how is this working? Right. And then to be able to recognize that it's not. All right. And I think I told you already that, when I first started in philosophy, they had these textbooks where they had 2 sides of an argument. And one side would make sense and be perfectly sensible, and I'd look at the other side of the argument and say, I don't know what he's talking about. I mean, I know what he's saying, but I don't see why anyone would take this seriously. But it's in a philosophy book, so it must be a good argument. No. The fact that it's in a philosophy book does not mean that it's a good argument. It just means that someone had to have an argument for the other side, so they put this in there. And so in philosophy books, and in fact, more so than any other academic discipline, you will see bad arguments in books. You will see bad stuff, stuff that is just wrong. Because if you see stuff that's wrong in a history book, that's a problem. It should be fixed. See stuff that's wrong in a geography book, someone's going to go. Do you know that they found there was there's a missing island? There was this island that was on all the maps, and then they found out that the reason it was on all the maps was that all the maps had copied it from this one map, and the map was wrong. There was no island there. Somebody actually went and looked, and there's no island there. And this happened last year, like, you tossers. So when something's wrong, and there's generally, well, there's one reason you would put wrong information in a textbook. If I was teaching the history of science, if I was teaching science, I would give you a lot of discarded theories. There's something called caloric theory, which is an old theory of heat, phlogiston theory, which is an old theory of combustion. And I'd say, well, look, this is how one theory replaces another. For history, I'd give you a variety of theories on one particular event, how something happened or what really happened, and give you the evidence and have you try to work out which theory is correct, so that you'd sort of be doing history. Similarly, in philosophy, I'm going to give you some bad arguments. I'm going to describe some good arguments, and I'm going to describe some bad arguments, and I'm going to be asking you, at least before class, to think about which argument is good and which argument is bad. Right, so there's a sort of thinky questions in the text, and there's a lot of arguments. In our text, there are arguments that are bad, and there are arguments given by the author of the text that are bad. And in fact, there's one that's just absurd, literally absurd. So it's something that can't possibly be true. And I'm going to be asking you guys to look out for that kind of stuff, to think of it. So to have this sort of critical attitude about everything in the class, even what I say, even though I'm never wrong. All right, okay, somebody laughed. Yeah. All right, so good. He was supposed to laugh at that bit. even if it was a courtesy laugh. So, right, some stuff is wrong. Everybody's wrong sometimes. Some people are horribly wrong, and some of the stuff in this class is wrong. And I want you to bear that in mind as you read the textbook. It's not just this guy says this. Because this is not an anthropology class. It's not a class on religion. It's not a class on political beliefs, right? It's a class on what's right and what's wrong. It's a class on what's true and what's false. So we're not just describing, well, rationalists believe this and empiricists believe this, and then we just leave it there because they're two just cultures, and you can't criticize somebody's culture. Well, yes, you can. And you can also criticize someone's beliefs. And the bottom line is this supported by logic? Does this work in practice? And the fact that it's difficult doesn't mean that people can't be wrong. By the way, people can be wrong and still be geniuses. Descartes is wrong about everything he ever said in philosophy, but he's still a genius. He's one of the most brilliant people in history. Also one of the most brilliant mathematicians in history. And he wasn't wrong about math, at least not as far as I know. But, someone can be wrong and be brilliant. And Socrates was quite brilliant, even though this is a ludicrous argument.
But he still opened up the ideas and made people think what could be and what isn't.
Right, he got the whole enterprise
Right.
started.
And that's what made him get the notice that he did.
Yeah. Also, philosophers like to annoy people. And he was
It's generally annoying.
generally annoying. Okay, so is any questions about philosophy or the class in general or anything? No? Good. Does anybody have a question that they're saving for after class, so that when everybody leaves, you'll come and ask me this question, and I'll go, oh my God, I should have thought of that. Call everyone back. Oh, it's too late. Has anyone got that kind of question? Something you're planning to ask me after class? Because if you come up to class, yes,
I'm
Morgan.
gonna ask you a question after class, but it has to do with the paper.
Okay, about the paper. That's a good question.
But after that, right?
No, not after class. Now. Ask now. So,
Well, I just printed out like what the thing is, the value of value, and I kind of already brainstormed.
okay.
And you told me on the paper you said do not say things like value is money. So we say what value is, how it's something that is important in our life, or that we.
Yeah. I think that's the right way to go. And you've got to try and explain what it means to be important. I'll try and get you started on this. In philosophy, we tend to look at questions people normally don't think about. So, and it means that, most of the time people's minds tend to run on rails. We tend to think the way we've been trained to think, and philosophy usually requires us to not think that way, whatever it is. And and so when I assign that question, value of value, what does it mean to say that something's valuable? It's intended to be a very basic question. And it's a question that maybe can be answered very simply. But there's actually a lot of philosophical questions are questions that can be answered very simply if you think of the answer. But if you don't think of the answer, you'll never answer it at all. Actually, I'll give you an example of a question like that. It's not really a philosophical question. Right. Has anybody ever heard of the Lady and the Tiger? It's a question that's so old that it's sexist. Right. So I'll try to update it a little. There are two guys. I will call them Pat and Mike. as is traditional. And each of the, oh, and they have spears, because they're guards. And each of them is guarding a door. Nope, they're not floating, right? There's a door, right? So there's a door here and a door here. But the nice guards, they'll let you in the door. Now, the trouble is, now, this is the sexist part. In the traditional story, one of these doors, behind one of these doors, is a beautiful lady.
Beautiful.
Who's happy?
Just give it a hair.
Yeah, but we want her.
What? Well, I'm putting the hair on.
Red.
I don't know.
Beautiful.
Right, but you could have, you know, an object of desire of your choice. You know, but it's called the lady. But it's something you like. Behind the other door, there is the tiger. With kitty cat ears and, I don't know, a tail.
Oh, you're good.
Art was not your
Art was
first
not your
subject.
I've seen plenty.
I have never given a student the finger, but you just came close. This is, I can't draw tigers, but it's a monster. I'll put it in quotes, tiger. But it's a ferocious.
You forgot the stripes.
I got the orange here.
So something you fear and something you desire, maybe?
Yeah, something that will destroy you and something you desire. Fear and desire, objects of fear and desire. Maybe it's a velociraptor. I actually done a velociraptor. I can draw that.
I want to see that. Oh, gosh.
Has anyone seen the meme velociraptor?
Yes.
Okay, there's the monster, the thing. Now, if you even open this door, you touch the handle of this door, it'll spring open, and the tiger will jump out and destroy you, eat you in a most horrible way. And if you open this door, the lady will come out and give you cookies. Purple cookies. Not sure what's in them, not sure I want to ask, but they're delicious. Or muffins, you know.
It
Something
tastes
you
like purple.
What?
It tastes like purple.
Tastes like purple. Okay.
You've never heard that?
Yeah, purple's a flavor, I know. Was it taste like? All right. Now, you don't know which door is which. One always lies and the other always truths, which is my way of saying tells the truth, but I don't want to write that out. Right, so one always lies, one always tells the truth. You don't know which door is which, what's behind each door. You don't know. You don't even know their names. You don't know who's Pat, who's Mike. Right. Now, and the room is filling with water, and you'll die if you stay. Pat and Mike will be okay. They have scuba gear. You're going to die if you don't go through the door. One door is safety and you know, cookies, maybe a cup of coffee, espresso. She's got an espresso machine in there. And the other is the tiger that will eat you and tear you to pieces before you both drown, because the tigers can't close doors. Right. Not a good deal for the tiger, actually. So, you get to ask one guard one question. And you have to use that one question of just one God. And you don't know who you're asking. It could be the one who always tells the truth. It could be the one who always lies. You don't know which one it is. And then you have to choose the door. So you've got one question. What question do you ask that will tell you which door to open? Yes?
I think I've seen this before. Don't you ask one of them what the other person will say?
You ask one of them what the other one will say. Right? And if you know the answer, right, it's really simple. But if you don't know the answer, it's monstrous. So if I ask this guy what this guy will say, what will all your friends say? You know, what will the other guy say? Right? And then you do the opposite. Because if this guy's the guy who always lies, he knows this guy is the guy who tells the truth. The guy who tells the truth will say the right door, and he'll say the wrong door. He'll lie about what this guy will say. So he'll tell you the wrong door. If he's the guy who always tells the truth, he knows that the other guy will lie and will tell you the wrong door. Because he tells you the wrong door, he says what the other guy will actually say, which is the wrong door. Either way, you go through the door that they didn't say. So if you say, right, so say this is Pat who always tells the truth, and this is like door A, this is B, and what will this guy say? And right, this is the lady. Oh, he'll say A is the right door. Okay, so that means it's B. Right. If he's the guy who always tells the truth, he knows that this guy will lie and say A, and he'll say it's A. Okay, so it's B. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I never could figure this one out. I was told the answer once, then I forgot it, then I tried to figure it out and I couldn't, and then someone else told me and I can't forget the answer again, so I'll never be able to work it out. So that's the thing about philosophical questions. Sometimes the answer is really simple, but until you figure it out, how many of you are going, how can you do that?
Yeah.
And then when you hear the answer, it's like, oh. Right, and philosophy is often like that. So, all right. So, worst title ever, I know. So, all right, so value. I have had a lot of students try to answer this question by giving me a list of things that are valuable. And I say, well, what does it mean to say that they're valuable? What does it mean to say X is valuable? If we had Martians coming in here who had no idea of the concept of value, and they asked, you were to explain it to them, that, you pile of gold and jewels and, I don't know, performing monkeys over here, and a landfill over here, stuff everyone wants to get rid of, right? This is valuable, this is not. Okay, so what makes this valuable and what makes that not valuable? What's the difference between the two things? And the beginning answer I come in, my personal answer is, okay, at least to start thinking about it, well, a valuable thing is something someone will put out effort to get. Remember this idea of valuable to, have you ever had something that was valuable to you but not to anybody else? So you would put out effort, if it was stolen or lost, you'd put out effort to get it. If someone else had an equivalent item but lost it, then, right, they just go get another one. Someone who doesn't understand the concept of value, in my view, is Lee Iacocca. Because there was a problem with the Mustang, the traditional, the classic Mustang that Lee Iacocca designed. That's how he made his bones. Right? Was that, like the Ford Pinto, it didn't have a gas shield, and so it was a fiery death trap in a rear-end collision. Fortunately, unlike the Pinto, people couldn't catch up to you to hit you in the back, so you were safe as long as you kept driving faster than all the other traffic. But still, Mustang owners were concerned about this, and they wanted to get retrofitted, and there was a big to-do about it in the media. And they interviewed Lee Iacocca. And Lee Iacocca said, well, what's the problem? Just go out and get a new car. And I'm like, these are classic Mustangs, dude. You cannot go out,
Sweetie.
you know, if you go out and get another classic Mustang, it's going to have the same problem. You have to have a gas tank shield. If you go out and get a Honda Civic or a Ford Escort, you no longer have a classic Mustang. Right? And these cars are valuable for reasons that a Honda Civic is not valuable, or at least is not currently valuable. So, right, if you see a cool car on the street, you know, see a 1930s or 40s, 50s car, a car from the 20s. A friend of mine has it says, I think, an MG3. It's the MG before, you know, it's the old rattle trap kind of, from the 1920s. It's a 1920s car. It's great. He gave me a ride once. I was like this far off the ground, and the door was, I mean, it was a flimsy little piece of sheet metal, right? I'm like, it was the coolest thing though. These things are valuable. They're not luxurious. They're not fast. They're expensive to maintain. Right? So people do this because they want this thing. So is that the direction you were thinking of going? That it's, you know, you can tell whether something's valuable or not. Well, here's a test to see if something's valuable. If I'm a Martian, is that a question?
Oh yeah, what is that essay gonna do?
That's in the syllabus. I don't know it offhand. I would have to look on the syllabus. And you should have a syllabus. If you don't have a syllabus, email me. There's also an early deadline that can get you 5 extra points.
Even if we did it wrong, we get 5 points.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's because you're doing it. The thing is about the Odyssey thing is I want people to get started on the thinking process. That's why they have the bonus. If they get started early, or they've done some thinking. I mean, if you turn in a paper that's obviously just phoned in, maybe not. But turn in a paper that demonstrates some effort, even if it's completely the wrong direction, that's fine. That'll get the extra 5 points. So the tests were valuable, right? All right. Put something outside your house with a sign on it saying free. If it's valuable, someone will take it. Or if you put it outside your house with a sign that says $10, someone will steal it because they think someone else will pay $10 for it. You've never heard that joke. You want to get rid of it, put a price on it, and then leave it unattended. Someone will steal it, and then it's their problem. So that's a kind of, so, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's a sort of kind of practical question. Some philosophical questions turn out to be practical questions. How do people actually act? Right? You know, the answer isn't always esoteric and metaphysical. Okay, so good question. Anyone else got any questions? Any more questions? All right, the due date for the paper is in the syllabus. If anyone has a syllabus, they can announce it and I'll write it on the board. What's the first due date?
Next week on the 10th.
I
have it right
here.
Right, next week. All right, like Monday? Yeah, okay. If it comes in before Monday, you get the 5 points. If it comes in on Monday, I'll think about giving you the 5 points. So.
I mean, email it to you before Monday.
It goes into turnitin.com.
Oh, that's right. Oh, that's
Right.
right.
Is there anyone here who has not yet used turnitin.com for a class? All right. Have you tried getting into turnitin.com yet? I would suggest if you have not yet created an account in turnitin.com, do so immediately to make sure you can. Because you don't want to be writing your paper, be coming up to the deadline and say, okay, now I'll set up my account to turn it, oh, I have no idea how to do this. Right. Thank you all very much for your attention. I'll see you next week.